Hello everyone! Welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're new. My name is Kristen, this is my booktube, and in today's video we are going to be doing another tier list. The last tier list that I did on this channel was ranking every single book that I read in 2023. And that was a lot of fun to do. It was a lot of work on the front end to film, but I had a lot of fun actually doing the tier list. I really enjoyed getting to rant a little bit about the books that disappointed me in 2023, as well as getting to rave about the ones that I really loved. And it's been something that I've been wanting to do again for a while, but I was trying to figure out what another good tier list topic would be. And I was just sitting at my desk at work the other day thinking about tropes in general in books. And I started to think that, I read a lot of books, I encounter many tropes, and there are ones that I prefer over others. There are ones that just completely give me the ick, and there are other ones that I eat up every single time they are in any book that I read. And so I thought, why not throw some of those tropes into a tier list and talk about them with you guys. So today's video we are going to be covering pretty much exclusively romance tropes, and if this video goes well and if you guys enjoy, I can do more tropes in the future. Romance isn't even the biggest genre that I read. I am primarily a thriller girly, so if there's any interest, I could also do this with some thriller tropes as well, because there are things that thriller authors do in their books that I absolutely love. And there are definitely things that thriller authors do that I absolutely hate. But for today's purposes, we are going to be focusing on romance tropes. I have also worn a special shirt for the occasion, and today it is LeVar Burton telling you to read banned books. Really channeling my inner reading rainbow kid today. So we have 35 different romance tropes to go through today. This list is by no means exhaustive or complete. This is basically just a list that me and 3 of my other bookish friends came up with in a group chat, stuck into a tier list making website. So if there are some tropes that I do not mention in this video, it's not because I'm specifically avoiding them. They just didn't come to mind when we were brainstorming, and I pretty much just drew the line at 35 because any more than that and I feel like this video is going to be very, very long. Before we get started, we're going to go ahead and go over each of the tropes that my friends and I picked out, as well as what I've decided to label each tier of my tier list. As you will notice, I did try to do like pink, red, and white for the different tropes. I just felt like that felt appropriate because those are like love colors. That's what like Valentine's Day colors are. So when it asked me for colors for the text blocks, this is what I decided on. Yes, so we'll go ahead and start with the first trope. These are by no means in any sort of order. I tried to mix them up and randomize them as much as I could, so hopefully I did a good job of that. We will see. So I'm just gonna go through and name the tropes first, and then when we encounter each one, we will talk about them a bit more in depth. So the tropes that we are going to be talking about today are going to be age gaps, parentheses, human, good girl and bad boy, accidental pregnancy, age gaps, fantasy, love interest falls first, but it's not revealed until later, win them back, enemies to lovers, love after heartbreak, small town, big city, fallen hero, friends/lovers to enemies, main character falls first, but the love interest falls harder, fated mates, fake dating, second chance romance, I can fix them, only one bed, a redemption arc, grumpy and sunshine, friends to lovers, a slow burn, miscommunication, mentor mentee, love triangle, opposites attract, academic/work rivals, forced proximity, found family, holiday romance, a sibling's best friend or your best friend's sibling, forbidden love, main character is jaded about love, pen pals/love letters, planner girly and carefree boy, and love struck/yearning love interests. So those are the 35 tropes that we're going to be talking about today. And the categories that they're going to be organized into are your standard rankings from S to F, but we're not using the letter descriptions. So in place of those, we're going to have yes please 15 more for the highest tier. Then we have I eat it up every time, enjoyable but not my faves, a bit cliche but can be done well but often isn't, and never talk to me or my TBR again. Alrighty, and with all of that, let's just go ahead and dive on in with the first trope on our tier list, and that is age gap, in parentheses, human. This one is obviously for romance books where there are two human characters and there is a notable age gap between them, enough so to where it is a plot point in the book. And the most recent book that I remember reading with an age gap like this is Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. And I do think that she did a great job with it, and I think that is mostly because it is not like the main focus of the story. It is noted pretty early on in the book, and it's also in the synopsis, that our main character is 10 years older than her love interest. And in the context of that book, I think that it was done well, but often I find if there is a notable age gap between two characters in your normal like human romance, not like fantasy where there's like immortal beings involved, it seems to come up a lot in other books, and it's just not something I'm particularly interested in. So for those reasons, I'm going to put this one in can be done well, but often isn't. All right, the next one is Good Girl, Bad Boy. And this one doesn't have to apply to a boy and a girl in this specific dynamic. What I was really getting at with this one is good main character who falls for a morally gray or even a villain character in the story. And I'm gonna be honest, I found that I'm not usually into this type of trope for the most part. There are a couple exceptions to that, but for this particular one, I was primarily thinking of The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. But in general, I think this trope is a bit cliche, but it can be done well, so I'm going to put it in the namesake category for that description. Alrighty, next up we have accidental pregnancy. And this is a trope that my friends and I absolutely loathe. And it's not because we are against, pregnancy or children or whatever. I just particularly don't like the trivialization of having a baby like that. And I also find it to be a little distasteful and insensitive because of how many women there are that struggle with fertility issues in general, and I just don't like it as a plot device for those reasons. I feel like it's okay to have pregnancy as a theme in a book, but I just don't like the accidental pregnancy being a huge plot point in books. Maybe that's a personal thing, but if anytime I am reading a book about this strong main character and, she is super independent, she has her life together, and then we go through this like journey with her to find her person and she's finally like happy romantically, and then it feels like there are so many authors that just throw in an accidental pregnancy just for some drama and it doesn't actually make sense with the story, and that's where I don't like it. And I feel like that is something that is done in a lot of romance books that I've read, and it's something that I'm not into. And I know that there's a whole genre of like baby mama drama books and like pregnancy as a trope, and I just don't understand, and it just doesn't feel right to me. So that pretty much gives me the ick instantly if a book has that. I will say that it doesn't necessarily ruin a book for me, but it does affect my perception of the book when that is used as a plot device. So because of those things, this is going to be our first book in the never talk to me or my TBR ever again, because I could totally do without reading another book that has an accidental pregnancy at the end. Leave that for the epilogue, leave that for the where are they now kind of chapter. I just want my heroines in my romance novels to have a story that is all about them and doesn't necessarily end with her becoming a wife and a mother, because that's not the journey that everyone takes. And I would like to see more variation in the romance novels. There are couples that just straight up don't have kids ever, and they are completely happy, and I just think that we don't necessarily have to have romances that end with, a happily ever after that includes, white picket fences and a yard full of kids. But that's just my opinion, so if you disagree, that's totally cool. But those kind of books are just clearly not for me. Alrighty, next up we have age gaps, but in fantasy books. So this is where the difference comes in, okay? I'm probably going to be mentioning ACOTAR, A Court of Thorns and Roses, several times throughout this video because it uses a lot of tropes, okay? And it is a very popular series that a lot of people are familiar with. So the things that I said about the human age gaps in romance books do not apply to fantasy novels, okay? It's a totally different world. There is magic happening, and there are beings that are 500 years old. So I'm a bit more okay with big age gaps in those kind of novels. And I don't know why that is. It just feels less weird for some reason, and I do enjoy it a lot more. But it's not one of my favorite tropes. So for age gaps in fantasy, I'm going to put it in enjoyable, but not one of my faves, because I do like it, but I don't go like crazy over it. Alrighty, next up we have love interest falls first, but it's not revealed until later. So this is a trope that I really do enjoy. I love a yearning male character, and I love a big reveal in any way, shape, or form. So if you give me a main character in a romance novel that is pining for most of the book, oh my god, I love it. I love it so much. I love a declaration of love, okay? I'm a softie. I love a big reveal, so I eat it up every time. I really enjoy when characters retrace plot points in the book and tell them from a different point of view and change the meaning of interactions after the fact. I love it. I love it, because all that does is make me want to go back and reread the book again after I know all of those details. So honestly, it's kind of a smart way to write a book for readers like me, because if you have a really good twist / reveal in a book, no matter the genre, this can go for thrillers, it can go for mysteries, it can go for romances. If there is a big reveal that fundamentally changes the way that you consume the book, I'm gonna read the book again, okay? I want to take in that story with the knowledge of that reveal at the end. So yeah, I am a sucker for that kind of trope. And you know what? Honestly, the more that I talk about it, the more I think it maybe should go up at the top. We're gonna put it at the top for now and see how we feel at the end. But when I did make the list for this, it was in the I eat it up every time tier, so me gushing has bumped it up a little bit. Let's see if it stays there though. All right, next we have win them back. This is a trope that I specifically linked back to a book that I read called The Bromance Book Club. It is a series, but I only read the very first book. And the entire plot of the book is that the main character is a professional baseball player whose marriage is on the rocks, and he's trying to win back his wife so that they don't have to get divorced. And I really do enjoy this trope. I think it is a bit refreshing to have a romance that is taking place in the middle of a relationship where, you know, they have all of these problems. And in the Bromance Book Club specifically, the two main characters had been together for a very long time. They had kids, and so they know each other very, very well. And I think that seeing a romance from that perspective, where you already have your person and you've kind of been taking them for granted, so the whole premise of the romance is you trying to win them back, I really enjoy that. I think that it's different from a lot of the meet cute and other romances. Not that there's anything wrong with those. I do enjoy those as well, but it's just a bit of a different take. And honestly, I eat it up every time. Alrighty, next up we have the classic enemies to lovers. Now, there's nothing really to describe with this one. Everyone knows an enemies to lovers story. There are a million that you can probably name off the top of your head, from TV shows to books to film. Like, they're everywhere. And there's a good reason, because they're S tier. It's one of my favorite tropes. I love the tension that gets built with an enemies to lovers romance, and there's also an inherent history between the two characters when they are enemies first. So I love that trope, absolutely, and I will take 15 more immediately. Alrighty, next up we have love after heartbreak. So this trope is when our main character at the very beginning of the book has just come out of a either long-term relationship or a relationship with a really rough breakup, and we join them while they are in the midst of grieving the breakup or fresh off the heels and ready to get back out to dating. And this one is a trope that I don't particularly mind. I don't think that there are any books that this trope has made or broken, and it is a bit cliche, but it can be done well, so that is exactly where it's gonna go. Next up we have small town, big city. So this one particularly makes me think of Hallmark movies, first of all, because that's the trope of every single Hallmark Christmas movie that I've ever seen. But book-wise, it is basically the plot of Part of Your World. You have the female main character who lives in a big city, and then the love interest who lives in a small town. This one, once again, is just a bit cliche, but I mean, there's a reason it's cliche, because it can be done well, but it's just, I can't put it any higher than C, just because of all of the freaking Hallmark movies that use this exact trope to death. So I think that's kind of oversaturated the market for this specific trope in general, and it's kind of become a joke at this point. But it still can be done well, aka Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. So that is where it's gonna land. Next up, we have a fallen hero. So this trope is where we have a character that is perceived as the hero throughout most of the book or series, and then they have the opposite of a redemption arc, a depraved spiral. Would that be the opposite of a redemption arc? What is the opposite of a redemption arc? I'm gonna go with depraved spiral because that's the best I can come up with right now. There aren't any examples I can think of without giving away that there is a fallen hero arc in them, but I do think that it's a little mid for me. It's not as impactful as a redemption arc is. I, for some reason, feel more for the villain characters that then turn a new leaf. Well, I guess that makes sense because it's like the bad guy coming to the good side rather than the good guy going to the bad side. So it makes sense that I like redemption arcs more, but yeah, I don't know what I'm trying to say. I'm not a huge fan of fallen heroes. I think they're a bit cliche, so it's gonna go in the a bit cliche, but can be well done. And I'm not putting these in order within the tiers. I'm just trying to break up the white here. Alrighty, next up we have friends/lovers to enemies. It's pretty much self-explanatory from the description alone, and I think it's enjoyable, but it's not one of my favorites, to be quite honest. I am talking a little too much, so I'm gonna try to get through some of these a little bit faster because we're a dragon and I'm trying not to have this video be super long. So next up we have main character falls first, but the love interest falls harder. So because I am a basic girl, I love the show Bridgerton, and this is essentially the plot and main trope of season 3, and kind of is a trope in the first 2 seasons as well, because Penelope is clearly in love with Colin from season 1, but their romance story doesn't actually happen until season 3. And once Colin falls, oh my god, that man is down so bad. Like, that man is down bad crying at the brothel. Like, not even a joke, honestly. He is so emo for the parts where he, like, realizes he's in love. He's almost insufferable. I'm sorry for any Colin stans. He's just not for me. Like, love it for Penelope. I love that she got her man, but no glow up could make Colin my type. I'm so sorry. I am a Benedict girl until I die, okay? And also Colin just kind of reminded me of all of the annoying people that I knew that studied abroad and then made it their entire personality. I tried so hard not to make that my entire personality when I moved to London. And like, I still feel like I talk about London too much. So I'm completely adverse to people like that. And yeah, so I just didn't vibe with Colin. But in any case, Bridgerton and my thoughts about Colin as a character aside, I do really like this trope. Like I said, I am a romantic at heart and I eat it up every single time. All right, next up we have Fated Mates, and this is another one that is really popular within the ACOTAR fandom. This is something that is very present in at least that series by Sarah J. Maas. And I know that it's a thing in other series, but in my mind it is most closely associated with the ACOTAR series. And I'm gonna be honest, this is not one of my favorite things about the ACOTAR series. Like, I think it's cool that they have like mates and a mating bond and they can like communicate through the mating bond. I think all of the details about it are cool, but the trope in itself, just generally of fated mates, when it's not specifically the mating bond that is laid out in ACOTAR, I think is enjoyable, but it's not my favorite. So that is exactly where it's gonna go, and it's gonna break up this pink right here. Next up, we have fake dating. And I don't know why, this is one of my favorite tropes ever. Like, ever since I was 12 and I was watching like ABC Family reruns of romance movies, I always loved a fake dating trope. Like, it is such a cliche trope for a romance novel, but I love it. Oh my god, I love it. And I want 15 more immediately. Like, repackage that as many times as you can because I will love it every single time. Give me a slightly different character, slightly different situation, some different, hurdles that are thrown at them, and you will have a happy reader in me, okay? Alrighty, next up we have second chance romance. So in my mind, this is distinctly different from Win Them Back or love after heartbreak, because for me, second chance romance specifically is reserved for romance books where it is centered around a couple that has broken up already and then they rekindle their romance after they've been broken up. Whereas the Win Them Back one, they were still in the relationship for that trope. So we're being a little nitpicky here, but in my mind, there is a distinct difference because I don't like this one as much as Win Them Back. I think that it is okay, but it is quite cliche and it's pretty mid in my opinion. So it's gonna go in the middle tier. We got a lot of consecutive colors going on in that tier, so I don't know, maybe we can break it up at the end. We'll see. This is probably not going to be a very aesthetically pleasing tier list, but nonetheless, it's a tier list. All right, next up we have the I can fix him trope. And this is one that specifically makes me think of the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. You know, you have Coriolanus Snow, who is this morally gray character kind of teetering on the edge of good versus evil, and then Lucy Gray and other people like Tigress in Coriolanus's life try to sway him to the good side. They're the ones that say, I can fix him. And I'm gonna be honest, I'm also going to put this one in the mid tier, because I am not personally into I can fix them type tropes. And it might be because I've been the I can fix him type girl before, and I feel like every time I have that thought, I never can fix them. And I was never going to in the first place because they didn't want to change, you know? So that's my own personal animosity with that trope in real life as well, but we're gonna put it in the middle tier. Next up we have, oh no, there's only one bed at the inn. Now, this is such a cliche. Like, so much of a cliche that it's like joked about constantly online. And I think people that don't even read romance novels know about this trope, know that it's a widespread thing, because obviously no two characters can share a bed non-sexually in a romance novel. That has never happened and it will never happen. I'm just kidding. There totally are books where there's only one bed and the two characters do share it without getting into any hijinks, if you will. Since this one is quite cliche, but it still does get me from time to time because it can be done well, it's also going to go in this middle tier. And we're gonna break up more of that white. Next up, we have a good old redemption arc. So this is another trope that is quite common, I feel. People like to bring up Avatar: The Last Airbender with this one. You know, Prince Zuko has his whole redemption arc throughout the series. And I think that is like the perfect example I can give without spoiling any books for people who may not have read the books that I was thinking of when I put this on the list. So that'll be the example that we use. And though I really enjoy a redemption arc that is done well, I have to put it in the enjoyable but not my faves tier, just because I don't think that it is a trope that really can say that I eat it up every time, you know? Because there are specific characters I can think of that have gotten redemption arcs that I did not eat up, okay? There are specific characters that I don't think should have gotten redemption arcs, and that's all I'm gonna say on that. So yeah, it's gonna go in enjoyable, but not one of my faves. Next, we have Grumpy and Sunshine. So this is a trope where there is one person who is the grumpy one, you know, the little rain cloud above their head, usually is described as wearing black or other dark neutral colors. And then you have the Sunshine character, who is usually literally described as bubbly. You know, they wear a lot of color, oftentimes they dress eccentrically. And the main book I was thinking about with this one was The Hating Game. This is a relationship where they are seemingly very different, and even though they're different, they just kind of work as a couple. I absolutely love it, and I truly do eat it up every time. I love a Grumpy Sunshine combo. Next up, we have Friends to Lovers. This is another really common trope. The book that I first thought about when I thought about this trope was My Favorite Half-Night Stand by Christina Lauren. And in that book, we have two coworkers / friends who end up dating. And I do enjoy the friends to lovers trope, but it's got nothing on enemies to lovers, if I'm being completely honest. I will take enemies to lovers over friends to lovers pretty much any time. For books, I will say. I don't want that in real life, but in books, enemies to lovers is superior to friends to lovers. And because of that, it's going to go in enjoyable, but not my fave. And I'll put it right in between that so we can break up the pink a little more. Alrighty, next up we have a slow burn. And you know, there's not really much for me to say about this except for I absolutely love a slow burn. Like, the slower the burn, the better, honestly, in my opinion. I hate a rushed romance, and I know that some people are not into a really slow burn, but I just love it, and I will take 15 more immediately to my Kindle, preferably. Next up, we have the miscommunication trope. We've been really heavy at the top half of this tier list. We're about to go down below the line a little bit. We're about to go on a deep dive, if you will, because I do not like this trope. I hate a miscommunication trope. Most of the time, this whole miscommunication trope can be solved if the two characters would just talk to each other. Like, that's all that needs to happen. And it frustrates me to no end when they just won't talk to each other. There have been books with this trope in it that have had me just yelling to the air, talk to each other. Oh my God, just speak to each other. Is it really that hard to articulate this to the person that needs to hear it? You could avoid all of this if you would just talk to each other. So yeah, that's how those books make me feel. Actually, now that I'm ranting more about it, I feel like it needs to go lower. Because it really does grind my gears. It makes me so unnecessarily angry. Even right now talking about it, it's got my heart rate over 100. So I think that means that it needs to go lower than I initially thought it would. So yeah, I hate a miscommunication trope. Maybe that comes from my tendency to over-explain things and make sure that I'm being as clear as possible, but that is something that we need to unpack in therapy, not on a YouTube video. Moving on. Next up, we have a mentor/mentee kind of situation. And this is one that I think really depends on the author because it can be done well. This is kind of a trope that I would ascribe to a book like The Kiss Quotient, even though their mentor-mentee relationship is inherently sexual from the get-go. I still feel that same kind of vibe with that book. I don't necessarily think that it's cliche, but I think that it can be done well. So I think I'm going to put it in can be done well, but often isn't, because I feel like there is a very, very, very thin line that is towed quite often in this trope where it's almost inappropriate. Like, when I was specifically doing research on romance tropes, I saw a lot of teacher-student tropes, and I don't like those at all. I don't like that kind of trope because I don't like the idea of a teacher or professor taking advantage of their power over a student like that. I know that that's getting a little, like, into the weeds of real life versus, you know, fiction. And, like, maybe other people don't have an issue with it, but it's just not something that I'm that into. So I feel like this tier is probably where this belongs. Next up, we have the love triangle, the classic love triangle. A la Team Jedward? Oh my god, no, not Jedward. Absolutely not Jedward. That is not what we're talking about here. Those boys are brothers, I'm pretty sure. That gets into a whole other weird realm. No, what I was gonna say was a la Team Jacob and Team Edward in Twilight. This is another one that is a bit cliche, but it can be well done. I don't necessarily think that the love triangle in Twilight was poorly done, but, you know, there are so many books that have a love triangle like that. I don't even necessarily agree with it being called a love triangle because it's really just not a triangle, because in order for it to be a triangle, the other two need to be interested in each other as well, but they're not. So, like, semantics aside, this is going in this middle tier. Next up, we have opposites attract, and there's not really gonna be much fluff with this one. I eat it up every time. I do love two people that seem like opposites that just work together. Next, we have academic/work rivals. This one specifically made me think of The Hating Game and also Book Lovers by Emily Henry. And this is another trope that I just eat up every single time. I love a bit of rivalry, that animosity that comes with being a rival, just like I like the animosity that comes with being an enemy. So you can see a pattern with these, I feel. Next, we have forced proximity. So this would be a trope where, say, there are two characters that are assigned to the same work project or something like that, where they are forced to spend more time together than they would normally choose to. A lot of times this can be coupled with the enemies to lovers trope, trope, and that basically gives you the vibe for the whole book. And as much as I do enjoy a bit of forced proximity, it's not my favorite, so it's gonna go in enjoyable but not one of my faves. Next we have Found Family. And once again, this is a theme in ACOTAR, and it's also a theme in other books like The House in the Cerulean Sea, which I know that's not like purely a romance book, but there is some romance in the book, and I also just really love that book, and it is like the entire embodiment of found family, in my opinion. But in any case, I do love a bit of found family. Found family is a theme that's like really core to my personal experiences, and so yeah, I eat it up every time. I love a bit of found family. Next, we have holiday romances. And when I put this down, I was mostly thinking about the Christmas romances. I haven't read the X-Hex or other like Halloween romances, and I don't think there are any Thanksgiving romances as far as I know. So it is important to note that I was primarily thinking about Christmas romances and romances that take place in December in general, because those ones specifically I feel like are overdone and quite cheesy, if I'm being honest. And I would put this down in it can be done well, but it often isn't. Alrighty, next up we have Sibling's Best Friend or Your Best Friend's Sibling. The main book that I thought of for this one is 99% Mine, and that's not a book that I particularly enjoyed. So this trope is exactly what it sounds like. Either the main character is dating their sibling's best friend, usually without the sibling's knowledge, or the main character is dating their best friend's sibling, also usually without the best friend's knowledge. And this is a trope I'm generally not a big fan of. I don't know if it's just because it's not something I would really ever consider doing. I don't like to conflate relationships like that, because, you know, my mind always goes to worst case scenario, and I think about like, oh no, what if we break up? Then like, it's gonna make it weird with the other person because it's gonna make them feel like they have to choose sides. So I feel like I can't get out of my head enough to really enjoy books that have this as a trope. And so for that reason, it's gonna go down in can be done well, but often it's not. Alrighty, next up we have Forbidden Love, and this is again pretty self-explanatory. Obviously, I think the most prominent example of Forbidden Love is Romeo and Juliet. Not that I need to recap Romeo and Juliet for you, but as everyone knows, the two main characters have families that are feuding and hate each other, and that is where the forbidden love comes in, because the two kids from the families end up falling in love. At least, I guess, as close as you can come to love at the age of 13, but that's besides the point. We're not here to rehash Romeo and Juliet and the things that are questionable about it, so let's not do that. Forbidden Love. I feel like it's enjoyable, but it's just not one of my favorites. Next up we have main character is jaded about love. So this is, again, self-explanatory. Usually it applies to female main characters who have just had enough of dating in the modern world. They're tired of giving their time to men who don't really seem to cherish it. And they're just kind of over the whole dating scene in general, and they're essentially ready to throw in the towel. And honestly, mood, because I feel like that a lot of the times out here in these streets, to be quite honest. But this is a theme in many, many romance books, you know. It's usually always, you know, the person that has given up on finding love and then it just kind of like falls in their lap. That's the kind of vibe. And as like cynical and basic as that sounds, I do eat it up every single time. Maybe it's because I'm a little jaded, but I love a main character that is a little jaded about love and then ends up finding love. It gives me hope. What can I say? Next up, we have pen pals / love letters. This is when the characters in the book either exchange emails or written letters platonically at first, and then they turn into love letters. And I'm talking about like either physical letters or emails, not text messages. not things like that. And I absolutely love the idea of love letters. I literally just said that I hate when people talk about like living in another country and traveling abroad, but I'm about to do the same thing. When I lived in London, I had an internship at an archive where I read and cataloged the correspondence for a prominent Victorian woman that was associated with the society where I did my internship. And I absolutely loved that internship because I love letters. I love a handwritten letter. I wish that people still sent letters to each other, even though I do love how like instantaneous and quick that communication is nowadays. I just think that there is something so special about sitting down to write someone a letter. And anytime it's in a modern romance, it takes me out every time. And I need it in more romances. I need it in more books, okay? I need more people that sit down and write notes and letters to each other because I just think it's so cute. I think it's so romantic. I feel like it just makes communication a little more special. This is a big trope in Yours Truly. As you would be able to tell just by looking at the cover, the two characters in that book start writing letters to each other at one point. And it's just so cute how they exchange them. Like, I love it. I cannot get enough of it. My appetite cannot be satiated for love letters, so it's gotta go in the S tier. You put these 5 things in a book and it will get 5 stars from me every single time. I promise you that. As long as the writing isn't just atrocious. I need to say that as well because I can't do bad writing. Next up, we have a planner girly and a carefree guy. So these are just the terms that I decided to use for this, but really the trope is where there is one character who is really structured and another one who is a bit more laissez-faire, carefree, free spirit kind of person. And specifically, I was thinking about Get a Life Chloe Brown because Planner Girly and Carefree Boy is quite literally the trope that is in that specific book. And I did love it. I loved that book. I love the whole Brown Sisters series. And as a planner girly myself, I do enjoy the idea of a more carefree, relaxed kind of partner. I like the idea of having someone to kind of balance out that more regimented person in the relationship and, you know, someone who can kind of get them to relax a little bit and let loose. So this is a trope that I'm going to put in the enjoyable but not one of my faves because I do like it on occasion, but it's not one that I really intentionally seek out pretty much ever. And lastly, we have a love-struck / yearning love interest. And it is really no secret to anyone that knows me, I love some yearning. I just love the idea of the main character having a love interest that is pining over them. This specifically reminds me of Pride and Prejudice, you know, and I just really like that trope. And I eat it up every single time. I love a yearning love interest. What can I say? So yeah, that is it for this tier list. I somehow accidentally almost like color coordinated this to where all of the pink and red is at the top and all of the white is at the bottom. So that's interesting to say the least. But yeah, so just to wrap up what we have in each tier, in the bottom tier, in Never Talk to Me or My TBR Again, we have accidental pregnancy and miscommunication. Then in Can Be Done Well But Often Isn't, we have age gap, parentheses, human, mentor / mentee, holiday romance, and siblings BFF / BFF sibling. In a bit cliche but can be done well, we have good girl, bad boy, fallen hero, love after heartbreak, only one bed, small town, big city, love triangle, second chance romance, and I Can Fix Them. Next in the enjoyable but not my faves tier, we have age gaps, fantasy, fated mates, friends / lovers to enemies, friends to lovers, redemption arcs, forced proximity, forbidden love, and planner girly and carefree boy. In I Eat It Up Every Time, we have win them back, opposites attract, main character falls first, but love interest falls harder. Found family, grumpy and sunshine. Main character is jaded about love. Academic / work rivals. And love struck / yearning love interest. And then in the top tier of yes please 15 more, we have fake dating, love interest falls first, but it's revealed later. enemies to lovers, pen pals slash love letters, and a slow burn. So yeah, that is my ranking of these 35 romance tropes and my justification for most of them. It goes without saying, but I am no authority on whether these tropes are good or not. This is all personal opinion. This is all just based on the romance books that I have consumed, so maybe there are some other romances out there that have some tropes that I've put that I don't like on here that would change my mind, but as of right now, this is how they sit for me. It actually worked out pretty well to where I have a top 5 in my S tier, so that's fun. And I do believe if all 5 of those tropes are present in a romance book, there is a high likelihood that I will rate it really, really highly. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It's different than most of the videos on my channel, apart from one. If you are interested in seeing more of these like tier list videos for other book genre tropes or anything else book related that I could do in tier list form, leave a comment down below. These are a lot of fun to do, even though they are a bit more work on the front end, and I wouldn't mind doing more of them if that's something that y'all would be interested in seeing. But yeah, if you liked this video, go ahead and leave a like down below. Let me know. You should also subscribe while you're down there because I put out new videos every single weekend. And yeah, I hope you guys are having a wonderful day wherever you are in the world, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!